welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, Mike Lano, and our special guest for tonight, Jonathan Schwartz from...
Well, Jonathan actually is now part of the show. He's a regular.
Well,
thank you.
If anything on the show could be called regular. If we could consider anything on this show to ever be called regular. But
I feel like I'm bordering on Joan Rivers territory.
Yes, all the way from Canada. We welcome you. Sorry we were supposed to have you on last week with Herb and our signals got crossed, so I really appreciate you coming.
Wait a minute, Jonathan, tell us what city, where are you though? Are you in Toronto proper in Ontario? Where are you in Ontario?
Right in the heart of Toronto, Ontario.
Okay. And are you going to be getting up at, well, it would be 6 your time, 3 our time to watch the funeral, or are you just putting your TV on pause? Are you going to even be watching it or paying attention?
Or do you even care?
Well, it's global news. It is world news.
It is global news, and we are part of the Commonwealth up here. In terms of what I'm going to be doing at 6 a.m., I will be starting my day to help get my kids to school.
That's the right answer.
That takes priority, unfortunately, over Her Majesty.
Yeah, she's still
dead.
She's not going anywhere. She's unless she gets zombified and starts joining the cast of The Walking Dead. I don't think that we're going to see her anytime soon.
What person, other than, say, a dictator, in this case, she was clearly the total opposite, diametric opposite, was doing that person's role for, what was it, 70 years, plus or minus?
Yes.
It is pretty incredible. It is incredible that they're showing the photos, every president since Truman. Mm-hmm. The U.S. at least, and I'm sure every prime minister of Canada and all of that. So,
but she never made a WrestleMania.
Yeah, well,
she's never.
I don't think she would get too.
I seem to remember. So obviously, the Queen would not have been involved with WWE, although I do remember certain United States presidents who were. But the Queen, in the run-up to the 1992 SummerSlam at Wembley Stadium. At least in the U.S., they ran a number of commercials with an impersonator and with other members of the royal family impersonated to try and drum up interest for that.
Oh, sure, I wouldn't put it beyond Vince.
It is something. There's world leaders there, so it is global news. How can you not want to watch something that is...
I don't care. I put me in the I don't care category. If she's dead.
You dropped out back with the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, thank you. She's not our queen. Well,
she actually is still our head of state.
Who is it? Yes, of course. And who's America's queen? Beyonce? Is that the way we're going?
Something close to that. Yeah,
I would have said Kim Kardashian.
It was Betty White until she died.
Yeah. Now I will give you, there's a woman like the Queen with a lot of class, beloved, animal lover. So that's a big deal. Let me plug some stuff very quickly. I don't have anything to do with it. Got Jan Wenner's new book. This is his second book, the founder of Rolling Stone magazine. Big deal for people my age. Dory Funk Jr. has a brand new book, The Last of a Great Breed. It's actually really good. It was self-published. Jonathan, I don't know if you've seen it yet. But
I have not.
You still haven't, thanks to the chroma tree.
Got a couple little, well, you can't even see it with the chroma here, but it is cool. Let's say you can.
The back comes out.
Now that's an illustration. I couldn't get out of Marty. I had her and Dory on my other show, or primarily Dory, and this is like an illustration. Or it was like they took a photo, but then they kind of posterized it of Dory, older Dory. I would have personally liked to see young Dory on the cover, but they have so many photos on the back. I don't know if I can get that so you can even see.
Yeah, you had it for a second.
Yeah, well, that's just the front. I'm trying to show you guys the back. But also another guy who actually wrestled, one of his first territories before he came into LA and San Francisco and the Tri-WF is Earl, Mr. Universe Maynard.
Oh, yeah. Earl Monroe,
yes. Star at the Cow Palace. World Tag Team Champions there and in Los Angeles. Well, LA was the America's Tag Champions. But for Roy Shire in San Francisco, 400 miles north, it's just the San Francisco NWA World Tag Team Champions. They had NWA World Tag Champs in Detroit for the Sheik, also obviously Mid-Atlantic. They were perhaps the most famous. But Earl,
almost.
First Maynard, yeah, he was such a nice guy. And he invites any wrestler that goes to the Bahamas. They can stay. He owns a chain of hotels. They can stay there free. Quite a gentleman. Also, Keith Greenberg, who just talked to him again yesterday, and I stupidly did not ask him. Jonathan, do you know why he went? I don't know if you read this book yet, but you know of it.
I have. I actually did a review of it for slamwrestling.net. It went up about a week ago.
I'm going to go read that. Did you ask him? I stupidly forgot to ask him why. Now, on the cover is an illustration.
Hey, guess what? I found it on the web, so I can share it here. So here we go.
Let me finish my train of thought. On the covers is a drawing, an illustration of the Fiend Bray Wyatt, but with a like an N95 COVID mask. And I didn't ask him, okay, that's fine for wrestling in the COVID era, where he goes back and forth between world events. It's really a brilliant book, back and forth between world events like Brexit and all of these things happening, Trump and Biden election. But he has, so what was the deal, Rustin? If you look, why, or Jonathan, if you know why did he use the catchphrase, follow the buzzards of the non-Fiend Bray Wyatt, the regular early Bray Wyatt? What are we doing, like follow the money? Is that, or what is your take, unless you point blank asked him, Jonathan, or Russ, if you're reading it?
So I've yet to speak with Mr. Greenberg about it. I actually tried to keep it a little bit separate while I was reading the book, especially, just so that I could, if I was going to write about it, I wanted to be a little bit removed from it. What I will say is I thought that the title really kind of captured just the general kind of view over the last 2 years, where it really felt like the world was kind of in a relatively dark place. I think that I didn't mention this in my review, but I think that really kind of gets captured throughout the book, just between the unrelenting bad news associated with COVID, what was happening politically in the world, just in terms of themes of isolation between Brexit and certainly what seemed to be happening in the United States in terms of government's responsiveness to things. And I think it was just kind of all of a piece. The part that I really found interesting was he chose to title the book Follow the Buzzards and use that image of Bray Wyatt on the cover. And lo and behold, before he finishes writing the darn thing, Wyatt himself winds up getting released. And as far as I know, he still has yet to resurface, apart from a couple of appearances on the autograph scene.
Yeah. And he's, I pretty much, well, depending on who you believe, and they've done these vignettes, but they could easily be for Braun or somebody else that he might be coming in. Apparently, he's a little bit hard to control. He's so creative and out there, but I think he would be a boom to anybody to utilize him. I don't know. I mean, I think Billy Corgan, if he can't go anywhere else, why not slum it for a while? I'm not meaning that in any derogatory term, but work for maybe a smaller promotion than AEW or WWE, and just, be creative there until one of the biggies pick you up, or perhaps he might be happy there.
I guess a bigger question right now is, does anyone want to work for AEW with the current state of the union, so to speak, over there?
It's already being all repaired. Some of the guys like Chris Daniels and one of the other ones, Michael Nakazawa, they've already been brought back. So that's kind of almost... And they're firing on all cylinders. So right now, it's.
Well, what about the whole CM Punk situation?
Russ, are you watching the two shows, Dynamite on Wednesday for 2 hours and Rampage an hour on Friday? You got to be watching those shows to be able to comment on them. You can't just read stuff on the internet. You have to actually watch, put in the time, and watch these shows.
So I'll take a swing at the Punk situation. I've spoken and written about it pretty extensively before. My take on it, first off, is so far as his remarks generally, which were pretty destructive, a lot of they've done is they've generated an awful lot of attention and a lot of eyeballs on the AEW product, whether it was meant to be a work or a shoot or somewhere in between. I think ultimately they did more harm than good, not least of which to Punk himself physically as well as to his stock within the company. All assuming that it's not a giant work like we just had with MJF not 6 months ago, and here he is coming right back to a main event spot himself.
Do you think it's a work? Do you think it's a work?
I honestly don't know. I think that I've been a fan of wrestling long enough to think that everything is potentially a work, and that even if something doesn't start as a work, it always has a tendency to get there in the end. You can look at Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Bret Hart. Sooner or later, if the economics make sense and the audience is demanding it, people find a way to get back to each other. I think the bigger challenge with Punk at this point is that if it was not a work, his conduct basically hurt him on two fronts. First off, he supposedly got hurt between the main event of All Out and the melee after the press conference, which is going to put him on the shelf between 6 and 8 months, allegedly. And really, if he can't get the better of the Young Bucks, whose whole style is based on being kind of goofy in a real fight, he's already lost twice very badly in UFC. Any pretense to him being a tough guy at this point is kind of gone by the boards. And frankly, he's about my age, and I wouldn't want to rush into fights either at this stage of my life.
John, let me ask you quickly, though.
Sure.
He obviously hurt himself at All Out. That was a given that we know of definitively. But did he get further hurt in the melee, like crossing what I'm calling the forbidden door from the scrum to where they had the fight, that area? Did he?
So that part, as far as I know, is still pretty gray. It's not clear whether he injured himself during the match or in the fight afterwards. The other thing I think that does even more harm to Punk is this is a wrestler who's made his greatest contribution, not even necessarily in the ring, although I do like his work in the ring, but as an interview, as a promo guy. His most infamous one to this point was probably the pipe bomb promo back in WWE, and I think it was 2014 or so. But it came out after the fact that was approved beforehand. That was very much a work shoot under the auspices of Vince and Triple H and whoever else was in charge at that point. If Punk really did go into business for himself, I have difficulty seeing any promotion of any kind of size and any kind of professionalism attached to it. In other words, the kinds that are going to pay him the kind of money that he would probably want in order to perform at this stage of his career. How do they trust him with a live mic again?
And physically, he's very.
And physically, I think he's made it very clear what his limitations are at this point. And sure, he could go out and have a decent to very good match with anyone, as he always has. One of the nice things about professional wrestling for its athletes is it's possible to work around one's limitations well into a longer period than you would, say, in any other sport. I mean, discounting Ric Flair's most recent comeback, he was certainly having fun matches well into his 50s and 60s, so it's not impossible to do that. You look at AEW's roster, and you've got guys like Sting and the Hardy Boys, and
well, Freddie Blassie, take a look at Freddie Blassie and John,
exactly.
Well into their 60s, still working. And I don't know if I made it clear to you guys, because on Busted Open, I had to sort of remend or correct Dave LaGreca, who had no idea. He kept saying he loved the blue cage that was in WrestleMania 2 with Hogan and Bundy in Los Angeles, not knowing Vince. Did I mention this to you, Jonathan? I don't know if either one of you.
You did.
Okay.
That was a new one for me.
But Russ doesn't know this. That Vince purchases, it's the moving in the very first, like 14 months ahead of time. He purchases the entire office, Mike LaBelle's LA office, and that was the second and very last Blassie steel cage. And the boys didn't like it because it was unlike our earlier cage from the 60s that Fred, meaning Blassie, turned babyface in a series of 3 cage matches with the Sheik, Ed Farhad, well known obviously at Maple Leaf Gardens as a main eventer, turned Fred face. But that was wood. It was a very wobbly structure, and Fred hated even trying to climb it. So he let a more youthful John Tolis do the actual climbing. But that was rickety wood and metal, and this blue, solid, unforgiving cage. All the boys hated because they hurt themselves on it. So I guess Vince Jr. purchased it, utilized it as an asset. So he buys it in 1982, early 82, and and then I guess used it as late as 96. They say that blue, if you go back and you'll see tape of that, the sort of like a sky or powder blue very light blue cage, and thankfully
I saw that they would truck that out to Arco Arena too, out in Sacramento when I lived out there. I saw one cage match featuring the blue cage out at Arco Arena.
See, although Fred only wrestled in it once, but it was called in our promotion when Roddy Piper and Chavo had their 2-year-long feud, and Piper feuded with Gory and Hector and Mondo, and later Bad Leroy Brown and Al Madrill fought in that Blassie cage. All of our announcers called it the Blassie cage, including the late Gene LaBelle. I'll have a report in just a couple of weeks, his private memorial. The funeral was family only, but I've been invited to speak at the memorial because I work with Gene and saw him 3-4 times a week from the 70s on. So I'll have a report on that. Ronda Rousey's going to be there, and quite a few others from MMA and pro wrestling. I'll shut up. Oh, one thing I wanted to add back to AEW is their ratings have been through the roof. They've been going well over 1 million since this melee. So I don't think the hardcores all know it, but the casual fans may have, still are hearing about, the scrum thing, but it doesn't seem to have hurt AEW. Although one thing I've got to mention, and I'll shut up and throw back to Jonathan, is Thunder Rosa Friday. She does now Busted Open for 3 hours. And you can tell there are inklings where she's basically just coming out and saying she's kind of unhappy that they're not having her on weekly vignettes, or, a lot of this stuff was done with an interim champion. She's a little bit sore. It sounds like she's almost sore. I might be reading into this, but other people have commented on it a little stronger, sore perhaps at Tony and management. Because when these people are on the shelf, why not utilize them? I mean, Bailey was off TV for 14 months, when she could have easily been managed some kind of a stable. Obviously, Hunter, brought her back.
I'll respectfully disagree on that one.
All right.
I appreciate
and that's
the
because
argument.
you're Canadian. You see, you're American.
Always.
You just say, "Screw you, Mike. I think this."
No, this is Mike's show.
No,
it's my show. No, it's my show. He's my guest.
And Russ founded it. I came aboard a bit later, but no, there doesn't have to be the embarrassing American stuff of Trump people, arguing. Like, I'll throw this out there. I go to a Target store, and there's 2 morons with a impeach Biden little signing thing there, and they're 2 feet from the door, and they're blocking people from entering. And I just let these guys have it because they, almost every year they waste millions of city dollars asking for recalling the governor and all this stuff. And it turned into they were yelling at people who refused to sign it, including myself. So that's not how we want to be. We want to be respectful of each other's opinion, even if they're diametrically opposite or whatever. I have no idea what Jonathan's going to say, but Jonathan, go ahead.
I'll stick to wrestling, and since Target didn't really last well up here, we had it for about 2 years, and then they closed up shop. What I was going to say is I take the point about wrestlers who are on the shelf for extended periods, but I kind of see it as an opportunity. So Bailey had this massively successful heel run, which itself started after she came back from another injury, after being that kind of Rick Steiner style kind of baby face before that, more kind of geared towards kids. And I thought as a heel, she just did fantastic work and continues to do fantastic work. But I think 2 things. One, as unfortunate as it is, and you never want to see people get hurt, obviously, but it does give talent a chance to refresh themselves in front of an audience, to tweak their characters, to kind of give people a second look. You wouldn't have Becky Lynch being the man and having the phenomenal run that she had, which I'd argue kind of creatively almost rivaled what we saw back 20 years ago with Stone Cold Steve Austin in terms of the kind of character progression she had. But you don't get that if she's not off a little while before, so people forget what the character was before that. You also don't get the doors opening for new talent if established talent just kind of keeps clogging the airwaves. So, I would be much as I enjoy Bayley's performance, I do think absence makes the heart grow fonder. And in the meantime, Bayley being off the air has opened the doors for people like Rhea Ripley, who it took a little while to build momentum, but now I'd say she definitely has it. I think she's wildly entertaining right now as part of Judgment Day. I think she's the best part of Judgment Day, frankly.
And a couple of weeks, maybe 6 weeks ago, we were ready to write off that function, that group without Judgment Day, without Edge in it. And now look at them. You know, that was masterful, having them stand over. The whole Dominic thing has refreshed them, you know, even though he's still green as grass. I agree with you. What I was saying, perhaps Bayley's character has not changed from when she left. She's still doing ding dong hello. I was thinking either maybe have like a 30-second every 3 months. Let's check in and see what Bayley, or how's the rehab going for Becky Lynch, or whoever is on the shelf. Just to, you're not taking time away, because time is so precious, even though, say, AEW only has 3 hours of TV a week, and they have a ton of people.
Well, you could show fewer replays. You could do, they have time. They have time.
Very short, so it's not taking time away from somebody to now come to the forefront, as Jonathan is saying, which is excellent. But maybe just 10, 15 seconds. Hey, here I am. I'm on crutches now, and I'm doing XYZ. Something like that to keep them in mind, but not to take away valuable time from someone like the kid now that just took the title in AEW. What's the kid's name from Buffalo, I think it is?
Daniel Garcia.
Yeah. So you want someone like that to grow. Now that guy's a made man, so to speak. And we are excited about watching Daniel Garcia's progression and stuff, and what's going to happen with him and Jericho. It looks like he's turning quasi-face, and he's siding with Bryan Danielson. And will he be in Danielson's corner this Wednesday for the title? What's the real? It's not an interim. It's the real title. There's either Moxley, the BCC, either Moxley or Bryan Danielson. So, but do you think, Jonathan, is that maybe too much what I suggested? Just maybe every 3, 4, 6, maybe every 8 weeks. Show like 15 seconds. Oh, this is what I'm doing to get back to wrestling.
So I can think of 2 instances, actually 3 instances, where they did that, and in my opinion, it never really worked all that well. The 3 instances I can think of were Superstar Billy Graham coming back from his hip injury, where they actually showed the surgery. And I can remember a really horrible vignette when he was rehabbing it, supposedly after, where he's kind of trying to climb a mountain in the Arizona desert, and he's carting his walker along, and I think Sean Mooney is with him, and he winds up going behind over tea kettle, falling on the ground while he's struggling with his walker. And if they were trying to position Graham, who was a former champion and a legend in the whole kind of one of the first real bodybuilding types, one of the best talkers in the history of the game, and it had the opposite effect. It made him look old and sad, and I think it wound up impeding his ability, because you knew if he was going to get back into the ring, people were really going to have to work around him. And even that comeback proved abortive, and they wound up trying to use him as a commentator. And unfortunately, he wasn't as effective as getting other talent over as well as he could himself.
Right there.
Or as a manager for Don Morocco as well.
Yeah, he's a manager.
And none of it really kind of paid off.
There's a topic right there, is with a legend like Graham or Flair, and there have been maybe a few others. I think Harley Race was fine because talking was not a strong suit for him, although he was very tough and believable. But, when he was managing Luger and Mr. Hughes in WCW, for example.
I didn't like him managing Luger. I loved him managing Vader because Vader was a heel in the mold of Harley Race.
Right, tough guy,
yeah.
Exactly. But I'm just saying, let's take just Flair or Graham for a second. They can do fantastic promos when it's putting themselves over, but they're not, and I'm not talking about doing play-by-play, which Graham really was awful at, but, and Flair, they've really never done that with him, but managing others and trying to cut promos and get them over. It's just not, we saw Flair do a lot of that with like AJ Styles and TNA. It just wasn't the same. It wasn't really something, I don't know, something was missing. And some guys can do that. And, like whoever, say Albano, he wrestled and had all kinds of zillion matches before he was a manager, and then excelled at that. But others cannot. I mean, Blassie was great at both, very unusual.
Heenan was apparently fantastic at both, but Heenan only ever worked more as in an enhancement role, which was kind of his brilliance, that he was able to put anyone over anyway.
Yeah, no, in the AWA, he was actually having matches for. It was like a very brief AWA junior title with Buck Zumhoff, if you can believe it. Now, I think Buck is still in jail but we won't.
Yeah, thank God for that. Yes.
But
Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal, held that title.
That was that was the non-William Steve Regal, the Midwest one. But some guys are just. What is the problem with them? And John Tolos was another one. Man, the guy was state-of-the-art promos when he was talking about himself against Blassie, or he had a big feud when he turned babyface. You know, every other year in LA he turned face, but he had an incredible series with the Sheik in '72 with Billy Graham, with Ernie Ladd, with Killer Kowalski, all in the span of 3-4 months. He was working with the greatest heels at that time. But as a manager, as the coach in WWF, not so good. And he even said what he said was, what he told me, because I ran his fan club, was scripted promos and reading off prompters, as Russ and I have talked many, many years about, was not for him. He was an extemporaneous guy. Maybe that's it for.
I think he also, as the coach, kind of suffered on two fronts. The first was it was just a lousy character. That was it was lousy, and the fact that he was just coach without reference to, how do you spell wrestling? TOLOS. Without really that context and taking away what made him John Tolos and what made him great at promos, I think, it's very difficult, especially for somebody who's been, working a certain gimmick or a certain style for so long, to just have that stripped away. Some people can pivot pretty readily, but I think that it was a losing proposition from the start. The other thing is, you have to remember, he was paired up with Mr. Perfect, who was a great promo in his own right, and who was working with Bobby Heenan before that. He was paired up with the Beverly Brothers, who before that were with Lenny Poffo. And I think, when you talk about promo guys, I think Mr. Poffo is grossly underrated in terms of what he was able to do.
And when he turned heel, I was going to say Tolos actually requested to be with Kurt because he was close for 30 some odd years to Larry. They were old friends, all of those territory guys. Jonathan, have you ever seen or heard, there really isn't any footage, but there's audio. And I was one of many who taped every week both of our 2 LA shows from about 66 on. So Tolos's promos from about 68 on, he was refining them. Have you heard Tolos in his prime? Say 68 to 72 cutting promos?
I couldn't pin the exact one, but yes, I have heard him. He was dynamic.
And there was one with actually video from 73 where he's in a feud with, I think it was Ruben Juarez, a Hispanic wrestler, Victor Rivera. But it was a Mexican wrestler, so I think it was Ruben Juarez, not Victor, it was Puerto Rican. And he's one by one holding up different dishes, stereotypic dishes, tacos, tortillas, flautas and stuff, and he takes a bite out of it, spits, and he goes, "This food is garbage." And now it would be not PC in this era, with 2022 eyes, but we were just raving, and he got a standing ovation from all of us after he cut that. And then there were some other ones. These were incredible promos, but even particularly when he's a face, and it could get the audience to cry, like Blassie when Blassie turned face in LA, or say Stevens and Pat Patterson, San Francisco, same thing.
I sort of, it makes me think about, kind of rounding the conversation back to CM Punk. Think about where we all were just a few months ago when CM Punk did come back and have his, big speech in the ring.
It's been, I think it was
a year ago. Yeah. So where we are, now with CM Punk.
See, that's the main reason that I have trouble seeing this as not a work on some level. I can't imagine being away from it for as long as he was, trying to make a name for himself in other venues like UFC and it not quite panning out, being away from the audience that clearly had an appetite to see him for so long, settling for that brief appearance on the WWE SmackDown after show. And for that, realizing, that the interest was still there. And he has this year-long build as he comes back, and he's selling out arenas again. And people are coming to see him. And people are drowning him out, chanting his name when he's coming out just to talk, forget anything in ring. And for all of and he had mentioned in, I think it was a tweet a few weeks before things erupted, that he was hesitant to turn heel because he didn't want to squander the capital that he had with his audience. And I don't know, maybe that was, that's not language you'd usually hear from CM Punk, so maybe that was a clue. But I have trouble believing that for all of the goodwill that he'd gained through this, despite having a reputation as a somewhat challenging person to deal with, that despite the massive reaction that he'd engendered, despite what I would imagine was a pretty lucrative contract to come back to do this for however long, you could see CM Punk t-shirts throughout arenas, and he would do well off of those as well. For all of that, basically to throw it all away for anything that was not an angle,
it doesn't
can't imagine that you would self-destruct like that.
Well, it's the Colt Cabana stuff. It's the Colt Cabana stuff that he was asked prior, that's been lurking in the background.
But he wasn't at the press conference. This was literally he just picks up the mic and goes for it.
Well, there was some other
context there too.
There was another what was seen. Supposedly somebody had some other camera thing where he was actually asked earlier about Colt. Perhaps just went off. But most people now, not most, but X amount of people are being vocal, and these are educated bigwigs, real reporters, are thinking that, he made Tony look not strong. Tony's sitting right next to him, and you've pointed that out several times just the other day with us on the other show. That I think, unless there's a lot of apologies and whatever, he may not be brought back. He's a liability physically, as hard as that is to say. I see the Bucks coming back.
The Bucks will be back.
Everybody will be back except for Steele, who trained Punk, in my mind, and perhaps not Punk at all. And that's fine because people are stepping up to the plate.
AEW is not lacking for talent. I mean, that's another thing too, is that you picked the wrong time.
I want you to promise. I want you to watch a full Dynamite 2 hours Wednesday, even if you fast forward or tape it and watch it later, and then Rampage on Fridays, particularly this coming week because it's the Arthur Ashe Stadium. Every match is huge. And
the Arthur Ashe, that does sound intriguing. But now let's turn the tables on our guests.
Watch, because otherwise you can't really discuss it. It isn't fair. It's like discussing.
Discuss it.
I think it's going to be worth it just to see the pop MJF gets.
Yes.
I think, if nothing else, I think the timing. I think if it's going to be a long con, I think that's part of the long con too. That MJF coming back and really kind of changing the narrative, just as Punk's kind of taking time out. I don't think anybody's talking about Punk with the promo that MJF just cut.
You're probably right. The short attention.
He has the chip though, so that's the scenario that it was. Wisely he's made an explanation as to why he wasn't in the tournament or anything. So,
AEW has plenty of grist for the mill. So
no, but he has a chip. He was given the chip, so now it's similar to the briefcase in WWE, Money in the Bank. Is it not, Jonathan? Is it pretty similar?
Yes, I think it's the same concept where it basically guarantees him a title shot at some point.
So say Moxley wins, but he's all beaten up. Just as this won't happen, but a ridiculous scenario that would be too WWE-like. But Moxley is exhausted. He's laying there, and then could MJF not come out theoretically with the chip and say, "Okay, I want my, give the referee the chip." The bell sounded, and he just lays down and pins Moxley or something like that. Is that a possibility, or is that not?
I think that could happen, but I think what the more likely scenario is Bryan wins, gets a run with the belt, and then MJF cashes in like that.
Yeah, no, I'm not. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, you have the potential for having a much bigger match if you do it that way, instead of just the cheap.
But now he's playing. It was weird that MJF is really, other than he had one title match early on in 2020, was it, with Moxley as champ, once Moxley beat Jericho for the strap. He had one match on TV, but he's never really been, other than the Punk match, he's not been a consistent main event performer. He's just been a step below. So now he joins like Hangman Page in that quasi level of Moxley, Danielson, Jericho, obviously. And how does Jericho, let me ask Jonathan this one, or Russ, if you watched on like Friday, Jericho lost to Danielson, yet he's able to challenge for the Ring of Honor World title. What planet does that happen on?
I'll go you one better. The one thing about All Out that drove me nuts was the idea that you would have the casino ladder match, and in the match you have Wheeler Yuta, who at the time was the ROH Pure Champion, and you have Claudio Castagnoli, ROH World Champion, in a scramble for a as yet undefined opportunity at the AEW belt. I've written before that there's just too many belts floating around in AEW/ROH. I think this was a really clear example of the perils of that situation, because in my mind, it completely devalued both ROH titles.
I agree.
If they're not even props to be considered in a match for the AEW championship.
And you know what? That match actually...
And it was a good match until the end.
And then they ruined it. They ruined it with that crazy finish. Those guys all coming out, and Morrissey, who I kind of groaned, he's not.
I like Morrissey.
Do you? Okay.
I recognize that he's had his share of challenges, and who knows what the future holds for this guy.
But I watched this run in Impact, and I just was not, impressed. I knew right before he got canned in WWE, he was getting a nice push. They did all they could with him, but. May prove me wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but he doesn't even look like he's very comfortable with the African American manager. It takes his name. What's his first name?
Stokely Hathaway. Now, which is actually Stokely is his real name.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask because Stokely Hathaway was a civil rights, a major civil rights figure. So I was wondering, you never hear that name. Not heard that name before, so I thought, okay, this is a character name, and he's paying homage to a real civil rights person. Is this so? It's Stokely Carmichael.
Something like that. I can't remember what his actual last name is, but right. I did look it up. And
Stokely, I think it's Stokely Carmichael, and he's Stokely Hathaway. Is his character name, or
yes.
I may be throwing that up? But kudos to him, and he has, as Stokely has blossomed, whatever you call him, he has certainly blossomed, because in NXT he was kind of an afterthought. He'd get in a sentence or two with that group, there with Roderick Strong, etc., Diamond Mine. But here he's a major player in AEW. They're taking full use of him as a great talker. And there's another guy who's elevated himself. Tully went away. I don't know. Do you know what the situation was? Why was he out of there in AEW? That's a mystery.
So my understanding is there were two things at play. First off, his contract was just coming up. They shunted him off to ROH to kind of head up his own stable, but it doesn't look like ROH is running shows with any kind of frequency just yet, or has a set roster just yet. And apart from his work in wrestling, he has a very active career in the ministry, and particularly he has a prison ministry that he wanted to devote more time to.
Because they hinted at it, but they never really had more than like a push shove with Arn, and that might have been fun before he left. And the Ring of Honor thing is disturbing. Maybe either one of you guys could comment on that. Why has Tony not started a dedicated TV show or done some more things other than, now it almost not anywhere near the horrors of WWE's AEW or ECW, but you have some good elements. If you look at WWE's for X period of time, Joey Styles was at least on payroll, and even though they sort of started having him call regular WWF and WWE shows. But what is going on? Why has there not been? I think fans hoped for a regular TV show that was a complete and separate entity, and now we see, at least for the time being, the Ring of Honor stuff is on a, it's like a part of the AEW show every week, and not the dedicated entity I think most people were hoping for. Although you already have the ref, who's already part of AEW anyway, but the ring announcer, the commentators, Caprice and Rick Cabana. What do you see going there, Jonathan? Why has Tony not moved a little bit quicker? I mean, the purchase was only a couple months ago. Maybe I'm not being fair.
I suspect a couple of things. One, from what I understood, until the purchase actually closed, things were pretty up in the air, even after he'd announced that he had bought it. So, for example, the last ROH pay-per-view, there was a bit of a dispute as to whether or not the sale had fully gone through. So I imagine at some point, if it hasn't already, that's been resolved. The other thing is, I think that it depends on what Tony wants to do with Ring of Honor, what he sees that second brand as. I was not personally a big fan of the acquisition to begin with. I think trying to manage two separate independent pro wrestling entities and not have cross-pollination and not make one roster look weak at the expense of the other, history runs against that. JCP tried doing it with the UWF 30 years ago, and eventually UWF was subsumed and their guys wound up looking weak. I mean,
I went to some of the to shoot him, and Bill Watts was backstage, but this is when they started incorporating WCW talent, and you had like Eddie Gilbert now managing Dick Murdoch, and it just...
And we saw with Next with the WWE recently, where recently, once Triple H started making Next look better than a lot of the WWE programs, the WWE depowered Next and
that was just
a bunch of people.
I'm guessing from what we know, Jonathan, I know, but that was primarily, Vince and his cohorts. But now that's another bit of excitement at the end of NXT, Jonathan. You saw that the colorful, all the colors, and the 2.0 went away. So now, that 1 year, fine, and now we're going to go back to black and gold, which everybody wants to see. Although the Raw and SmackDown, they're basically NXT black and gold. All the excitement, all the great past Triple H characters in NXT.
So I'll tell you what's exciting me now, and counterintuitive, but I am very curious about what's coming up at Crown Jewel on November 7th. And not necessarily why you would think. First off, they've announced the main event is going to be Roman Reigns and Logan Paul.
Did you watch that press conference yesterday?
I did. So funny enough, in my column about a week before Logan Paul signed, I drafted a column saying, in the wake of WrestleMania and his match with The Miz, Logan Paul should be the guy to beat Roman Reigns.
Really? Well,
and I know any serious wrestling fan who just heard me say that is probably throwing stuff at the computer screen right now. Zoom in, Mr. Cameraman, as the Iron Sheik would say. But I think that WWE is at a point where towards the end of the Vince McMahon era, they booked Roman into a corner. He is not going to lose to any conventional opponent. They've made that clear. He's within 100 days of Pedro Morales' title reign. My personal feeling is they should just let him eclipse that and get him onto that top 5 kind of list if they're going to really make a case that he's one of the best ever.
Or he'd be 4 or number 3, because if he only...
He'd be 4.
Did Bruno.
Because you've got Bruno Sammartino's 2 reigns, Hulk Hogan's first reign, and Backlund's reign are longer.
Okay, you're right. I forgot about Hogan.
But he's already outstripped guys like Bret Hart, Macho Man Savage. Flair had negligible WWE runs. John Cena has never had a long run just because very different booking philosophies. But if they're going to run with Reigns in this capacity, I'd have him get to Pedro Morales before somebody beats him. That said, what I find interesting about the opportunity at Crown Jewel is twofold. One, putting the belt on somebody like Logan Paul, even if it's just kind of a flash title reign and he loses it back in the States on Monday, it dramatically shakes up the status quo. The second thing is, I think that the crown jewel and the events that are taking place in Saudi Arabia generally, again, from Toronto, we're used to WWE announcers calling us Bizarro World because we'll cheer for the heels and boo the faces. Very often because the heels tend to be Canadian for an American audience. And we cheer for the hometown boys.
Sammy and Kevin.
Exactly. If you look at what's happened over the last several cards in Saudi Arabia, it really is Bizarro World. You have Bill Goldberg going over Bray Wyatt for a championship. You have a phantom gigantic Royal Rumble with people who you've never heard of on the card, and Braun Strowman winning a belt that goes missing shortly thereafter. You have, a sequel to The Plane Ride from Hell. All kinds of weird stuff seems to happen outside of WWE continuity when they go international there. So what better place to do something so completely outside the box?
Jay, do you think that's karma for taking Saudi money? Might be karma. You believe in karma. Somewhat.
I think that's a second interesting point, because I think that one of the big tests of the post-Vince era is at some point this current contract with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going to come to an end. And I wonder what the internal feeling within WWE is as to whether it should be re-upped, and if so, on what terms. I think they took a lot of heat for going into this venture in the first place. I think when you had Vince calling all the shots, you could basically say the buck stops with him. The more corporate and the broader responsibilities are shared within that company, and the more accountable it has to be to shareholders who are not named McMahon. I'm just curious how that evolves. And I think that both from an in-ring and from a business standpoint, and I'm probably going to write about this for my column on Sunday because I've been thinking about it a lot. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see, and a test of WWE's new leadership as to what they do with that contract and how they manage it creatively as well as from a business perspective.
And what's your prediction on that? What do you think that the WWE will do?
I always shy away from giving predictions, and I'll tell you why. Speaking as somebody who trained as a lawyer, I'm not big on hypotheticals, and I think that the thing that I just don't know is I don't know what the interest on Saudi Arabia's part is, and I don't know how deep their pockets are.
Trained as a lawyer, hypotheticals are pretty much all you deal with a lot of times.
Oh, no, I stick to the facts, sir.
Well, no, you have to go and try every possible angle on a lot of things to eliminate stuff out so that you only have whatever's left.
This is more speculation. I mean, we do know that the guy coughing up the bucks, the main person, it's almost like a money mark, and he requests, I want, say, Hogan or Goldberg, his heroes. And so then they had to work the booking around, okay, this guy wants this, and this person over there. And
for a show, he'd wanted Ultimate Warrior and Yokozuna, and unfortunately, both men had passed well before the show started.
Herb Abrams.
What they should do is they should do a holographic thing, those holograms, and have the holograms fight, and then say, yeah, there you go, there you have Yokozuna against.
Actually, Russ has a point there. Tommy Dreamer's told me, and he's told others, that he thinks in X amount of years they'll actually have a virtual. They won't need wrestlers. They'll just create them the way they've had these Michael Jacksons and Whitney Houston and Tupac Shakur's. Jonathan, you've seen those.
I have. I kind of think we're already there. I think that, not that people are lining up to go to Madison Square Garden to watch holograms fight, but if you look at the ascendancy of online gaming, for example, I think that a big chunk of eyeballs on entertainment are now into this world.
Yeah, no, there's
they sold out all those ABBA virtual shows too, where
and
it's
Fortnite tournaments and things like that, and Call of Duty, and
it works better for movies. Remember the movie with De Niro and I think Pacino from about 2 years ago?
The Irishman.
Right, and they did this thing to age them, and it was all very believable looking, but scary at the same time that they can do this. Can they? And they've done that. Haven't they done that on some TV shows where somebody's dead and they've done some piecing together of the person, so that, like Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher.
They did it with Carrie Fisher. They did more rudimentary because it was a couple of years ago. But the last installment of The Fast and the Furious, they did that with Paul Walker once he passed away in an accident. But this has been a thing forever. I mean, Bela Lugosi in Plan 9 from Outer Space, they passed away midway through, and
it was
they had some
with a cowl in front. Do you know
exactly.
That? It was hilarious being. Oh, that's so funny.
Do you think that at some I think my prediction, since I am not afraid of hypotheticals, is that the WWE will just take the money and run like they always have with Saudi Arabia.
It's a different WWE now with Hunter loving the business, not ashamed.
Yeah, but money's money.
Doesn't even know this. WWE put out a tweet 8 days ago, and it just said the word wrestling. That's a big deal.
Yeah, but money is also what moves all this.
And I don't necessarily disagree with how important the money is, especially if it's an awful lot of money. As Groucho Marx once said, "These are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others." That said, that's my favorite Groucho quote.
You like that better than "I wouldn't be in a club that's accepted me"?
It had me as a member, yes.
No, there's another line about a swimming pool, but I'm not going to repeat it. The punchline is it okay if I go up to my waist? But I think one of the challenges WWE has in reconciling those particular events is if you think about how much work they've done on tribute for the troops and just how strong forever they've associated themselves with the U.S. and with the military and with national pride and all that kind of thing. And I say this as somebody who's not based in the U.S., but I think at some point they're going to get really called out on the inconsistency between, promoting this really jingoistic image, which is, you can draw a line from Sergeant Slaughter, Hacksaw Duggan, Hulk Hogan, Kurt Angle, John Cena. I mean,
did you
Undertaker was over the road that was full of the stars and bars.
Every Veterans Day and Memorial Day, you would get the thing sometimes with Cena or JBL, and it really irked me that not so much that because we all rah America, blah blah blah. That's fine, and support the military, those guys. But this it seemed just.
It seems really inconsistent with that.
It's
discordant.
So it was patronizing, and the rest of the world that gets this are probably thinking, "What on earth is going on?" Again, it was all Vince.
Then again, it's wrestling, and so you're talking about a federation that once had Mae Young give birth to a hand. So you're not necessarily talking about
the real life stuff, and you're pushing the fact that you love Trump and you are a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. That's a bit different, and I think there's going to be a lessening of that. We're going to see. I'm hoping there is. Jonathan made a great point that it made no sense if you're going to be pushing rah America in the military and all this stuff, and yet you're doing biz with Saudis and taking their money. That's prostituting yourself.
And that's what America does every day, sadly enough. We do business with Saudi Arabia every day. I mean, look at the Live Golf Tournament.
It might be the lesser of an evil at the time.
But look at the Live Golf Tournament as another example. Even though it's not wrestling related, but the Saudis are doing the same thing.
Yeah, but those guys, a lot of those golfers that took the money, they're being criticized and viewed. A lot of guys have come out, fellow golfers, their peers, and said, the guy's a dick. I won't have anything to do with him anymore, and good for them for.
And in fairness, the PGA has always marketed itself as an international sports league. I mean, you have a number of European golfers, you have Japanese golfers, you have Canadian golfers. It's a different market that they're after. If we were talking about the NFL going into Saudi Arabia, I think that or NASCAR, where they really kind of wrap themselves in the flag as part of their brand identity, I think it would be a bit of a different conversation.
Where are the PGA tournaments in Canada? Why are we not seeing TV? I know there's events there. It's popular in Canada and the provinces, but why?
We have the Canadian Open, which kind of, from what I recall, we have the Canadian Open and we have a women's event as well. Yeah, and they usually kind of float around.
In the U.S., if you're going to be a world organization, you want to show these tournaments in other places, South America, Europe, and obviously Canada. Are probably our closest allies on this continent. I don't think we're as close to Mexico as we are to Canada. And hey, we're lucky Canada puts up with us, in my opinion. Isn't that what you said like a few months ago, Canada? It's almost like the George Costanza thing is, okay, we're going to look at what America's doing, and then we're going to do the total opposite because that'll be the right thing to do. That's of late. And that's pretty wise, or at least it was with the prior so-called president.
Yes.
And hopefully we don't repeat that. That's not an angle we want to see returning.
We do want to get, Jonathan, I want to give you a couple minutes to talk about, could you just give me how you got started with Slam and your wrestling journalism career?
Sure. I literally read an article on Slam Magazine, and I thought it was interesting. And I felt that after a lifetime of fandom and being somebody who's just always loved writing and, enjoyed talking to people about wrestling, I thought I could do something like that. So I drafted an article and I literally just sent it to Greg Oliver Blind.
What was the article?
It was about 8 months ago, and the whole discussion about WWE versus AEW had reached a fever pitch, to the point that you had a lot of fans arguing that there can only be one, and if you're a WWE fan, you should be watching AEW and vice versa, and you should be rooting for the other federation to fail. And my response, it was one particular article not on Slam, but I thought that this was just a good venue for me to respond. My response to that particular piece was, "You idiot." And this is one of the few cases in wrestling where I won't preface it by saying, with all due respect, the fact that you have multiple promotions that are succeeding right now after so many years where WWE was the only game in town and was creatively so unsatisfying beyond a really narrow strip of their fandom, and where they could get away with saying that, calling us the WWE universe instead of fans, or not using the word wrestling or title belt or any of the kind of conventions.
State hospital. Now you can. Now
medical, exactly.
Medical.
But the fact that at the time you had, a flourishing scene outside of WWE and so many more wrestlers able to get work and to leverage their position in any given promotion and make a better living for themselves, which I think is also critically important. And that you could draw so many more fans from different points of view. If we're only talking about one promotion and one approach to wrestling and the same people all the time, eventually it gets boring and eventually viewers drift away and they don't come back. We saw that with WCW. The rise of AEW gave, that segment of fandom a chance to come back, and they have in droves. It gave people who don't necessarily care about Brock Lesnar, but find Darby Allin or Orange Cassidy entertaining, it gave them a home. And I tend to think with any of this, a rising tide lifts all ships. The one thing that I hope for any of this, if anything is to be learned from the Monday Night Wars back 30 years ago, or from Vince's expansion and gobbling up all the territories, WWE needs to leave its competitors, not to beat them, but it needs to allow them to survive, because that's where the next generation of WWE stars are going to come from. It's not going to be from NXT. With all due respect to the very talented people who are working there, you're not going to get the reps you need in that environment that you get working on a thriving indie scene or in front of a hard camera on AEW or Ring of Honor if that comes back. I just feel bad that Lucha Underground, which was my favorite of these promotions, unfortunately didn't survive, although it's been kind of brought into Major League Wrestling as well in some capacity. The fact that you have GCW taking over the old ROH spot, I think, is a positive thing too.
Because nothing's better than someone
in GCW, more blood until a few weeks ago with Moxley bleeding every single show. Let's next week with Jonathan. In 2 weeks. Next week, Russ, you have Donovan Morgan.
Yes, very special show.
This is a guy we knew well from the Bay Area. This is where the area that produced Shotzi Blackheart and Pam, a.k.a. Bailey, and quite a few pieces of talent. But I want to talk about Lucha Underground because I went to X amount of tapings, and I had a blast there, a total blast. Was hanging with Conan.
We'll definitely have Jonathan on on a future show.
To join us next week with Donovan Morgan, just let me know. But otherwise, Jonathan, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, let's talk about those promotions because you say the ship raising everybody else to that level. Impact has been vastly improved this year with the addition, particularly the New Japan guys. But they brought in Killer Kyle, a female, and is it Killer Kelly? Killer Kyle, Killer Kelly.
Well, hey, we're almost out of time for the show this week.
But Jonathan's correct. They have oomph. Everybody's playing up.
I agree. Jonathan, give your plugs out so that we can make sure people can contact you.
Sure. My column runs next Sunday on slamwrestling.net. It's Wrestler's Court with Jonathan Schwartz. Appears every 2 weeks. I think I've just given an unwitting preview of it today, just now, before it gets to press. I mentioned I just completed that book review of Mr. Keith Elliott Greenberg's book, Follow the Buzzards, which I also heartily endorse. There was an article also on slamwrestling.net that I do want to highlight. It ran, I think it was about a week ago now, about would-be indie promoter from the Northeast, John Scazzari. Sorry?
Gordon Scazzari.
I apologize. And his attempts, and it was a very well written, often very sad article, great bit of long form reporting that answered a number of questions and has kind of a good insider take. I understand that Dr. Mike actually had an even more inside take on it, and that there might be some differences in facts, but for somebody who's kind of coming into that story without the background, just a really good, insightful piece of wrestling journalism and journalism in general. And
Evan knew him, and I was there for the whole thing. Evan came to the house show and the taping. I was backstage. I managed. I did a bunch of stuff, so I saw it on the inside, and then I would relay, not just to Meltzer.
In a couple of weeks, we should probably talk about that. That'd be perfect. All right, that's all that we have for this week, guys.
Last book plug besides Keith Elliott Greenberg's We Could Be Bowie and His Heroes by Tom Hagler and Tony Visconti, who actually produced a lot of Bowie's records along with Ronson and some others. Get out there and enjoy wrestling. There's so much to enjoy, so many fantastic books. And Jonathan, you got to get an ECW press book deal. I think you're at that level very, very quickly.
Thank you. You know what? My dream is to write a book.
So there you go.
So here's hoping.
Let's talk about that either next week.
And everyone I talk about who writes a book says their dream becomes a nightmare. But that's a different story for another day.
Let me get there.
All right. Good night, everybody. See you all next week.
Good night, you guys.